inspiration, the words of insight that may spark something in your mind. Listen, I'm not trying to tell you what to think. I am just trying to get you to think. So let's spark it up. I have some announcements for you on this 29th day of December. It is absolutely the fourth day of Kwanzaa, and on this day, the principle is Ujamaa, which means cooperative economics. It just simply means that we build our communities by supporting our stores, our shops, and other businesses that profit our community. And it just means that we really work together to spend our dollars with good black businesses. Some of them are small and not very large, but you could spend some money with it. Think about it when you're going out to these big box stores. And sometimes some of the things you can get or the services, you can spend them at a wonderful, nice black-owned business. Every Sunday, join us live on Facebook, our page, the church's page, Village DC, and also live on YouTube and Periscope. 9 a.m. Get up and join us for worship. Our worship is not everlasting. As a matter of fact, we're probably within an hour. But you will enjoy it. Enjoy a good word and you get information about what's going on with coronavirus and all the other things that we're doing in our church. So that's 9 a.m. every Sunday morning. Don't forget, we pray on Wednesdays at 6:15. Let them pray with us. Get your cup of coffee or whatever else you're doing at that time. And pray with us. We pray for 15 minutes from 6:15 to 6:30. And so you can get that information from our website or from any of our social media platforms about the time, about the access code and number. Now, we know the new year is vastly approaching. 2021 is basically here. So our Daniel fast will start on July 11th. We'll go for 21 days and we'll end at midnight on the 31st of January. So join us for this fast. Some things will not happen unless you fast and pray and also add meditation and practice. So get ready. You gotta get yourself ready now. You got about maybe 2-3 weeks. Get your refrigerator ready, get your food ready because you don't eat any meat, you don't consume any sugar unless it is natural sugar through fruit, real fruit. And it is a good way to start the new year, to cleanse yourself, to get your mind ready, get your spirit, so you can think about how you're going to reimagine 2021. And Holy Communion will be on the 17th of January, 2021. Remember, you can bring anything you want to represent the bread or the wine, and just that you take communion with us, because it's a time in which we remember how important it is that we have a relationship with God through Jesus. Also remember our own history and our own culture, how important that is. Now I want to thank all of you again for your gifts to the village throughout the year, your tithes, your offerings. Some of you also have been volunteering or other kinds of things you've been doing. I want to just thank you for doing that. Now listen, we're at the end of the year. And some of you perhaps need to unload some of your funds and contribute. We are a 501c3 church. That means that we are a nonprofit. You get the tax deductible for giving to our church. Now, so we encourage you to give to Giveify, you give to Cash App, and make that last of the year gift to us. And so we pray that you support the things that we are doing. Remember, the ministry is about touching lives. It's not about brick and mortar. The village is in the business of touching lives, and that's the ministry, and that continues to be done. Tonight, I want to talk about church-on-church crime. We've often heard about black-on-black crime and very little about white-on-white crime, but I want to talk about church-on-church crime, So how do you handle hurt and the harm that often comes from your peers and persons who you think are allies? How do you handle that? Hurt from people that are supposedly be your peers, your colleagues, your allies. What do you do when the folks who lead churches act worse than the people who don't claim to believe in God, nor do they claim to be followers of Jesus? Now, I must admit, there are some bad actors who claim to be spokespersons for God, as well as probably some good persons who do good things. Proclaimers of the gospel who preach a gospel that reminds me more of an old Amway rally, pumping up the attendees to sell more soap and sign more people up to become Amway distributors. Like a big rally, a big rah-rah rally. And some of these peddlers of the gospel sound like Gordon Gekko in the movie Wall Street. When he gave his speech to the stockholders, he spoke from the floor at what looked like a space that held about 1,000 people. And he said, I'm not a destroyer of companies, I'm a liberator of them. All the while he was destroying these companies. Ben Gecko went on to say, the point is, ladies and gentlemen, that greed, for lack of a better word, is good. Greed is right. Greed works. Greed clarifies, cuts through, and captures the essence of the evolutionary spirit. Greed, he said, in all of its forms, greed for life, for money, for love, for knowledge, has marked the upward surge of mankind. Wow, what a statement. He must be just talking about America. I don't think he got to be talking about America. And greed, mark my words, he said, will not only save the Teldar paper company that he was about to destroy because he was raiding their pension fund, but the other malfunctioning corporation called the USA. Now, I agree with him last statement. The USA is absolutely malfunctioning at times, but greed will not save it in my estimation. So of course, there are more movies like that. The Wolf of Wall Street and Billions tell a similar story of America as a greed country driven by greed and avarice without any regard for the people's lives they trample upon and ultimately destroy. That's the kind of sort of country we find ourselves in, and people, not all, but some have sort of taken up that kind of spirit, and unfortunately it's found its way in some of our churches. So I shared this story of greed and hypocrisy and malpractice in the ministry, not by all pastors, churches and denominations, but some bad actors like Kerry James Jr., who's a new pastor of James Memorial United Methodist Church, right there, 4625 G Street Southeast, where our church shares space, who's had the real sort of sense to come in after only being there in July of this year, to terminate a 5-year lease that our church had just signed in March of 2020 with the former pastor, Reverend Loretta Johnson. Can you imagine? He's only been there since July, and now he's terminating our lease. Well, actually, he's evicting us illegally. Now, to be clear, the Village Church does not want to be anywhere it's not wanted, and be anywhere where we're treating in such an unjust and ungodly and unlawful way. But it is something I want to share so you understand that there not only is our church dealing with this, but there are people, when this pandemic sort of, they think it's coming to an end and some of these moratoriums are lifted all over the country, people all over this country will be dealing with evictions. And it's a terrible thing. And in our case, though, we're being pushed out by a church that doesn't make any sense. We have a little office. I wish I could take a picture and show you of our office. It's just a little place in the corner. We have a few cases that are stored in the basement. And of course, when it wasn't COVID, we were using the sanctuary. And practically, that's in other parts of the church at various times, but not on a regular basis. But that's where our main office is, back in the basement, in the corner. And of course, that is not even good enough for us to stay in. So listen, my concern though is about people. How will they deal with evictions? I think our church, I believe we will be fine. It's just inconvenient. It is absolutely disappointing, costing us money. Because you got to hire a lawyer, you got to lawyer up, because then you have to try to fight back. But not fight back because we're trying to stay 5 years, just buying us some time, so we can get ourselves together and do what we need to do. But I guess Pastor Kerry James Jr. thinks that he's above the law and he can act as sort of some of these landlords are acting. And I read this, by avoiding the law, they're doing what they call these silent evictions, where they're hoping that their tenants don't act. They're hoping that their tenants don't know very much. And so they prey on folks, and they assume that they won't take action or won't use the law to help them through these situations. And even though they're illegal, a lot of these persons would do what I call a silent eviction. I read about some the other day, one in particular, a young man, his landlord locked him out of his place. He couldn't get his medicine. And he had to go down to the court, and it took a couple of days, and he finally got back in. The landlord had to give him another key, and he said he decided he just didn't want to be there. And this is happening now, and you can imagine when some of the moratoriums is lifted, even though the moratorium in D.C. has been extended to March of 2021, there's still landlords who will be acting in a sort of immoral and sort of just unempathetic kind of a way. Now, I understand you landlords, you know, you may not be getting all of your money, you may be struggling yourself, and that's understandable. But we're all kind of struggling. And so why would you want to make it more difficult for people in the midst of all this? And some of these landlords have gotten some relief themselves. And the interesting thing, you see, in our case, we're like David and Goliath, you know. We're David with a slingshot in one stone. Because you see, the Baltimore-Washington Conference United Methodist Church is a big conference. It's led by Bishop Latrell Miller Easterling and the Greater Washington District Superintendent, Reverend Gerald A. Green. He's kind of has jurisdiction over D.C. And there are other superintendents. It's a pretty big district here. But they have oversight over this, Kerry James and Jones Memorial. But they're absolutely complicit in the actions of Pastor James, because they haven't done anything to even broker mediation or tell them, look, man, that's not good, that's ungodly, that's not right, you need to pump the brakes. They haven't done any of that. Matter of fact, they just kind of pass it on down and sort of wash their hands after they receive the letter asking them, telling them about the situation. They want to act like it really doesn't exist, or they don't really care about it. It's a very interesting thing. And I guess they forgot the New Testament teaching in Luke chapter 6:31, and it says, do to others as you would like them to do to you. And I wonder, would they want to be evicted? I wonder, would they want to be thrown out without anything? And so I had to think about it. I said, this church, this United Methodist Church, is a mainline denomination. It's a predominantly white denomination. That's very wealthy, very large, 12.5 million members in 136 countries, 145 million in gifts and donations this year alone, and a $400 million sort of reserve fund. I understand it's a big denomination, it's got a lot of things, but $400 million is not anything to sneeze at, right? But you just think about the enormity of this church, and you think about these African Americans who are playing a role in a predominantly white church. It seems like they're acting as overlords and overseers, mimicking the worst behavior in the oppressor by making it difficult for us. Listen, the village, you know, we had a great relationship with Reverend Johnson, who was there for 17 years. For the last 5 to 7 years, we had a great relationship with her and her church. And she was a wonderful lady. I don't know, how do you change something in less than 6 months? You know, our church though has a love for the community. We are there in Benning Terrace because we want to be there. We love that community. We're not trying to do something to make money on the community. We're not trying to bring in a group like the United Planning Organization because they can pay more rent to the church. Yeah, they may do something good, but it's not just about the money. It's about doing the work in the community so the community's uplifted, so that they're empowered. What happened to just collaboration and working together? What happened to it? So this becomes what I describe as church-on-church crime. Here's Bishop Easterling. You know, she had a wonderful speech the other week, and she was talking about Black Lives Matter because of the flags or the banners that were hung on those churches that are Mother Metropolitan AME Church and the Asbury United Methodist Church, which are downtown churches. She made a nice speech about how Black Lives Matter and about justice and all these other kinds of things. And I said, wow, what a great speech. I said, but what about us? We're Black. We're this small church in the basement of Jones Memorial United Methodist Church doing ministry that many of their members don't want to do. Doing ministry, yes. And our lives don't matter. The people whose lives that we are touching in the Bennett Terrace area and in Ward 7, they don't matter. No, we're not downtown, but I think we should matter. But then I remembered something from the ancient stories of the African griots in the Holy Book. I remembered something. And it was a story about this man named Jesus, this African man, this Palestinian Jew. He was acquainted with church-on-church crime. I forgot about that because his church denied that they knew him. And his people, the Jews, were complicit in his demise. So I had to take a step back, even though I was very disappointed and very upset, and realized, wow, man, Jesus had to deal with church-on-church crime, man. So how can I deal with it? How can I best deal with it in my disappointment, in my frustration, at times in my anger, and trying to hold my congregation together and also take care of the community in which God has given me to serve. So listen, I want you to understand that the village we will survive. Yes, we've had to hire a lawyer. So if you want to contribute to help us to pay some of these lawyer fees, you can give to Givelify or to our Cash App, and make sure you say to help with legal fees or help with your eviction stuff, but that would help us. But we're going to be all right. And I want to pray for all those people who may be facing eviction and may be dealing with the uncertainty of a future because you don't know where you're going to live. Listen, this is Dr. Tait. Thank you for joining me for Tuesday Spark. Have a wonderful evening. Take care.